Does OpenClaw make n8n obsolete? No. But it does make a certain way of thinking about automation look old. And that is the more important story. A lot of people are asking this question as if it's just another software comparison. OpenClaw versus n8n, agent versus workflow, new thing versus old thing. That framing is too narrow because these tools are not strongest in the same place. And if you force them into simple replacement narrative, you miss the real shift. The real shift is architectural. For years, automation was mostly designed around explicit workflows. A trigger fires, a process starts, data moves from one system to another, a condition gets checked, a predefined action runs. That is the world tools like n8n were built for. And to be clear, n8n is still very serious in that world. Its own documentation describes it as a workflow automation platform that combines artificial intelligence with business process automation. Its product messaging emphasizes visibility, control, and traceability, and its integrations footprint is large enough that it is clearly built for real operational work, not just demos. Public n8n materials currently point to more than 400 integrations, and its agentic AI integration page references 422 plus apps and services. That matters because production automation usually does not fail on the language model. It fails on the plumbing. It fails on the boring parts: authentication, retries, branching logic, data mapping, rate limits, logs, approvals, edge cases. n8n lives in that world. It is a workflow engine. It is designed to make execution legible. It is designed to let a human inspect what happened. It is designed for processes that need to be repeated and governed. That is not sexy, but it is real. Now look at why OpenClaw feels different. OpenClaw is pulling from the agentic direction. The visible ecosystem around it is built around skills, memory, tool use, and long-running agent behavior. You can see that in public collections of OpenClaw skills. You can see it in public memory tools built specifically for OpenClaw. You can also see it in the way community projects package OpenClaw with n8n, rather than arguing that one eliminates the other. That is a very important clue because it tells you what users are actually trying to do. They are not just looking for another workflow tool. They are looking for something that feels more like an operator, something that can take an objective, interpret it, remember context, select tools, and decide what to do next. That changes the experience. The old mental model was build the workflow. The newer mental model is give the system the job. That feels like a much bigger leap, and in many cases, it is. If I tell a workflow tool to monitor 5 sources, interpret what matters, prioritize follow-up, draft outreach, and adapt based on what it learns, I usually need to design a lot of that structure upfront. If I tell an agentic system the same thing, I am implicitly asking it to think through the path. That is why people get excited about tools like OpenClaw, because agentic systems compress the distance between intent and execution. They move the user one level up. Instead of building every path, the user increasingly describes the objective. That is real progress. But this is where a lot of commentary falls apart. People notice that agents feel more capable, and then they jump to the conclusion that workflows are dead. That conclusion is weak. Agents are good at deciding, workflows are good at executing predictability. Those are different competencies. And in production, that distinction becomes brutal. An agent can decide to do 10 clever things, but if the processes touch customers' records, invoices, calendars, support tickets, approvals, or regulated systems, cleverness is not enough. You need determinism, you need logs, you need retries, you need permissions, you need controlled handoffs. You need to know exactly what happened and why. That is not where most agent first narratives like to spend their time, but that is where enterprise reality lives. And this is why the replacement narrative does not hold up. OpenClaw does not make n8n obsolete. OpenClaw changes where n8n sits. That is the better way to understand it. n8n is increasingly less important as the front-end experience and is still very important as the execution substrate. That is the shift. The user may interact with the agent first. The agent may hold context. The agent may decide which path to take. The agent may choose whether to search, draft, escalate, summarize, or trigger something. But underneath that, there is still enormous value in workflow layer that can call systems reliably, transform data cleanly, manage branching logic, and leave an inspection trail behind. That is why the market behavior is so telling. There are public OpenClaw plus n8n stacks, not OpenClaw burial sites for n8n, not migration guides saying workflow tools no longer matter. Stacks, combinations, layered systems. One public Docker-based stack describes itself as OpenClaw plus n8n, a personal artificial intelligence operating system with workflow automation, and the compose file explicitly runs OpenClaw as one service and n8n as another. That is not marketing fluff. That is architecture speaking clearly, and it points to a more serious conclusion. The future is not likely to be workflow only. It is also not likely to be pure agent chaos. The stronger pattern is agent above, workflow below. The agent handles intent, the workflow layer handles controlled execution. The agent handles ambiguity, the workflow layer handles repeatability. The agent handles prioritization, the workflow layer handles operations discipline. That is the blend that makes sense. Now step back and look at what this means strategically. If you are n8n, the threat is not that OpenClaw instantly deletes your value. The threat is that workflow design stops being where users want to start. Users increasingly want to begin with natural language and objectives. They want to say, here is what I need done. They do not want the first step to be drawing boxes on a canvas unless that level of control is necessary. That means workflow tools are under pressure to become more agent native. And to n8n's credit, its current product positioning already reflects that pressure. Its site and docs now speak much more directly about artificial intelligence agents, traceable reasoning on the canvas, and advanced artificial intelligence functionality inside workflows. That is not accidental. That is adaptation. If you are looking at OpenClaw, the strategic challenge is the opposite. It is not enough to feel more intelligent. It's not enough to have memory and skills. It is not enough to impress people with autonomy. You still need discipline, execution behind that autonomy. Otherwise, the agent becomes a smart improviser sitting on top of fragile operational rails. And that is where many systems become impressive in demos and messy in real use. So the cleanest way to say all of this is simple. OpenClaw does not make n8n obsolete. It makes workflow-first automation feel incomplete. That is much more precise claim. The center of gravity is moving upward from workflow design to agentic control, from explicit path building to objective-driven execution, from telling software exactly how to do something to telling an agent what outcome you want. That does not eliminate workflows. It changes their role, they become infrastructure, and that may actually be the biggest shift in this whole market. Because once the workflow layer becomes infrastructure, the winning interface is no longer the canvas. The winning interface is the agent. The canvas still matters. The logs still matter. The integrations still matter. The operational discipline still matters. But those things increasingly live behind the agent, not in front of the user. That is why this is not a simple feature comparison. It is a stack transition, and stack transitions are where markets get rearranged. So when someone asks, does OpenClaw make n8n obsolete? The answer is no. But here is the sharper answer. OpenClaw makes it harder for workflow tools to remain the main character. And that is a far more serious kind of pressure. Because once users get used to agents that can interpret intent, remember context, and decide what to do next, they stop wanting to begin with manual workflow construction unless they absolutely have to. That is the shift worth paying attention to. Not whether one product kills another, but whether the primary interface to automation is moving from workflows to agents. And right now, that looks very real. So the right conclusion is not OpenClaw versus n8n, it is OpenClaw above n8n, agent on top, workflow underneath, intelligence above, execution below. That is the model that best explains what is happening, and that is the model I would bet on. Thanks.